Okay, now we're back on time. Sorry, but no,
Right.
yeah, it really what they're doing is in some cases with the Mac Mini, it's like they're charging 250 to $300 just for that form factor. And
Hmm.
there's if it's worth it to you, I'm not saying don't get it. I'm
Right.
just I don't think it's worth it for
No,
most
no,
people.
absolutely, I agree. I think it is overpriced. I will argue that against Apple fans, and I think they should have changed the price point. It's too expensive, and Apple has a bad reputation of overdoing price points in other countries around the world. Terribly
Well, no,
expensive.
no, no. I know where their formula's coming from. I know where their price points come from. Because I've dealt with importing stuff directly from China or Korea and yada yada and so forth. And there's this
Hmm.
old school retail markup formula, and
Hmm.
Apple uses it each and every time. The problem is that doesn't always jive with what the market's doing.
Hmm.
And there are times you need to go, well, it means we make less money, but we'll sell more, so we'll make it up in margin. We need to price this at what the consumer wants to buy it for, rather than what our formula dictates we should mark it up for. And that has been something Apple has never really been good at adopting.
Right.
It's
Well, they
the
haven't had to previously, up until they really started getting into the Intel world. And now that they're in the Intel world, people are going against Mac spec for spec. And
well,
this
no,
is
no, that's
something
the thing. It made it so non-technical people could do like-to-like comparisons.
exactly.
Before
Yep.
Intel and the PowerPC set, you could it was apples and oranges, but you could do okay. This is the closest comparable. Is you could you could do some factoring and figure the difference in margin, but only a true geek could do that.
Sure.
Once they switched to Intel, it became very obvious. And I think there are these haven't been leaked, but if you've ever called Apple support and tried to get a
Hmm.
sign, they will not acknowledge what Intel chip they're using. Like you have to go the roundabout way to figure it out because they don't want you to do those comparisons. Like if you call them up and ask, just because your spec
A
sheet
specific. Yeah.
because your spec sheet listed on your thing is a little light and it can either be this one or this one, and I'm just trying to understand what I would be buying. And it's like they'll transfer you to a engineer who doesn't understand there's a difference between this CPU and this CPU. I'm like, you're an engineer. It's like, uh,
They're ambiguous in some of their spec reports to giving you the exact Intel chip. Absolutely.
well, yeah,
Uh,
but that's why we have Google. It's like,
yeah. But Max, it's kind of like with the argument that I use in I'm a big advocate for licensing out OS 10, and I get the biggest heat for it. And I keep the topic silent because it puts the entire YouTube Mac world in an uproar. And
well,
but I think that their lines are too unique. They don't make a box. We have an iMac and a Mac Mini for a desktop, and that's the end. There's no other desktops. And when people
Well,
try to describe
and I know what you're talking about with the mid tower, but I also know why they don't like it. And I don't think Apple will ever make a mid tower. And the reason is because
probably
there's a lot of mid towers out there, and in the mid tower form factor, they wouldn't sell it if they tried to use the over proprietized motherboards like they use in a Mac Pro. They can get away with that in a Mac Pro because of the type of system it is. That would not fly by any scope of the imagination in a mini tower. And the moment you get rid of that proprietariness, where they have to go through you, where they have to get the RAID card for you, where they have to get the other side, you're going to have people who are geeks upgrading their own Macs and
mm-hmm.
increasing the
Oh,
longevity of them.
it's a huge community. They call them Frankentosh, and I used to do that, but this was with the old PowerPC. We break them and drill into them and make motherboards fit in different
Yeah,
configurations.
and Apple doesn't want y'all doing that. They don't like y'all doing that. They don't like that community. Even though I think in the long run, it's part of it. It was one of the core aspects of the whole cult to Mac thing. It's like, look what I can do.
Apple has changed the game plan. It used to be a small, and I don't care about the size, but it used to be a closer community. And let me tell you, every Mac person back in the day, because I was first in the Macs before Windows. I only left the Apple computer for Windows and then went back to using it when OS 10 came.
I see.
Uh,
I'm like you, but I didn't come back. It's like, but I've talked about that. It was the differences in the UI between the early Windows and the early Mac, and that was a personal preference thing. It was one made sense to you than the other. It's how things work.
But the Apple community back then, I'm going to tell you that every Apple person, and sometimes you go to those clubs and things, all of them were super geeks and knew technology inside and out. And today it seems like a lot of that is just vaporized, and it's
strongly discouraged by Steve Jobs and Apple.
Apple is cool, and it's just suave. Hey, look how small it is, versus getting into the geeky stuff.
Well, Android has the opposite problem. I swear, with the way some of these Android devices are going, I'm going to be doing. You can't see me right now, but I'm holding up my keyboard as a phone. Hi, have you seen my new Droid? It has a bigger screen. It's like...
right. And I miss some of that, to be honest. That there's not a lot of that Apple community out there. They're still there, but you got to go look. It's harder to find them.
Well, it's like, and the problem with those communities is there's two types of them. There's the ones who they're Apple fans, but they're not fanboys, and that they are a good community. But when Apple attacks what they think is best for Apple, they don't say, "Okay, Apple, we understand. We should worship at the altar of Steve."
Yes.
And then there's the other Apple community, which is, well, you see, Steve told me this was wrong, but now he's changed his mind, so it's right.
Yes. Yeah. Apple, even under Jobs, when he first came back, back in '97, there was still a nice community, and Apple did respond. You know, the users would say, "Hey, this and that," and they would address it, and they still do some of that to some extent. But of late, especially Jobs' comment on, "You're holding it wrong," and all.
No. It's like, well, and this is the Apple that was the back in the day Apple, and this is why I never went back to Apple, and this is why I didn't sign, because here's the thing. Apple is a great little company that listens to their users and cares about. It's like, we're helping the little people, we're protecting them from Big Brother, as long as they're this small little tiny company. The minute they get big enough to have any kind of power, even if it's only a little bit, they turn into Big Brother overnight and go, "Listen here, user, you need to do it my way. You need to do what I say. I'm Apple. I'm infallible. I'm perfect." And that's the thing I don't like about them. There's,
I would say that I'm not going to go to an extreme, but this recent thing seemed very pompous to me, and
they have a problem accepting the idea that they made a mistake.
Yeah. It seems like we have to pull Apple's teeth harder today than before to get response, I guess, as a user community. They still respond, but it's missing a lot of the elements that used to be there.
It's like, my personal assessment, I don't know where you stand on that, is it's only going to get worse going forward, which is why I have no real interest myself in being dependent in any way, shape, or form on anything in the Apple ecosystem, because I don't see these problems getting less. I see them getting a lot worse as Apple gets any bigger.
But for my wife and my parents last year got an iMac, and now they're all gung-ho Apple. They really like it a whole lot better than Windows. My dad finds it much more intuitive, which he would never use a computer under Windows. He would just get frustrated with the whole experience.
I sometimes wonder on people like that. Have you ever done this experiment? I don't even know if you mess with Linux any, really. Have you ever done this done that experiment where, like, you put a good user-friendly Linux distro in front of them also, and see if they like that?
I've never tried that. I've never attempted that.
Okay.
But my parents right now, they're cool with Apple, and I think Apple addresses very well in a lot of their product delivery, just making a lot of things easy for just the everyday user who doesn't want to hassle or even know anything to do with computers. Like my dad would always say, I want to open up my word processor. and print my chef certificates so that I can give these certificates out for the chefs that have